Thanks for listening to this video. My name is Mike Henley. I'm a consultant urologist and I'm Deputy Chair of Consultants Committee, and I'm just going to talk you through a set of slides about the Consultant Industrial Action Ballot, which opens on the 15th of May 2023. And I'm going to talk about the background to it, what we're trying to achieve, and what you need to do as a consultant in terms of this. I'm going to divide up the case into three sections: profession, patients and government, and just talk through them briefly. I'm going to show you during the course of this talk what our pay erosion looks like. I'm going to look a bit about the pensions taxation fix, but also the implication of that pay erosion, the very real implication of that pay erosion on the value of our pensions, which is enormous. And we're going to look at why the Doctors and Dentists Review Body does need to be reset to its founding principles. If you're a patient, you do care about this stuff, and you need to care about this stuff, because unless we sort out doctors' pay properly for now and for the future, we're going to have problems with recruitment and retention. Why are people going to come back from Australia, fellowships in Canada, all the rest of it? We're going to just struggle and struggle. And if you're a patient, the reason that's important, obviously, is that down to COVID and the pre-existing backlog, waiting lists really need fixing. And medical emigration is a real risk to that. If you're the government, they've already said, Rishi Sunak has put waiting times as one of his top 5. That's not going to be done without consultants and juniors working hard. We are the people that are going to deliver that, along with our other colleagues in the NHS. And the risk of them not sorting this out and not getting the NHS fixed is probably an electoral wipeout. They're already struggling, but it won't be good for them. And the election is only a year and a half or slightly less than that away. And in a very real sense, what we're seeing at the moment, if you're a patient out there with a hip that needs replacing, it's going to feel to you pretty similar at the moment to NHS dentistry, that it's okay if you've got an emergency, but if you want timely elective care, you're going to really struggle. From the politician standpoint, because we're so close to an election, it's quite possible that anything we sort out now will start in this Parliament and carry across to the second, and that de-risks things for politicians. Just to have a little look at what's happened to our pay, here is a graph of consultant pay going back to 2008 up to last April, and it's measured against Retail Prices Index, which is one of the measures of inflation. And during that time, our real terms pay has been eroded by 35%. So that's the equivalent of working all year but not actually being paid until you get to May, which I'm sure you'll agree is an enormous thing. If we look at it from the point of view of cash terms increase, how much has our pay increased in cash terms? And these figures are from NHS Digital. Our pay over that time has increased by 15%. What we often say to each other as consultants is, well, everybody's done badly, the whole economy's done badly, so maybe 15% is fine. So here is a graph of pay for the whole economy. This is everybody, private and public sector. And during that same period where our pay went up by 15%, the general economy pay has gone up by 40.5%. So clearly those figures are very different. Additionally, during that time, we've obviously had an 8% increase in our pension contributions, so the 15% is even less generous than it looks. What does that look like in real terms? I'm going to go through this pretty speedily. You've got the pay thresholds down the left-hand side. You'll be able to pick out which one you're on. Where pay was in 2008-9, when government started to interfere with the pay review body really heavily. What pay was last year, with last year's award, 21-22. And then the next set of figures is where pay would be if pay had kept up with inflation. And you can see that the difference for a newly appointed consultant is £31,000 a year, and for a consultant at the top of the scale, £42,000 a year. And that's before this year's inflation is taken into account. So you can see our pay award last year was 4.5%, and our RPI inflation February to February was 13.8%. What's important to think about is that this isn't just relating to pay, but also that decrease in a third carries forward to your pension. So potentially people who are currently retiring now without pay restoration are suffering a loss of hundreds of thousands of pounds during the course of their retirement, and that can still be fixed. And here's a graph just to show you across many different bits of the economy how people are getting on. It's not the same index of inflation. It's it's only since 2010, so it's different indices, but you could see very clearly train and tram drivers have done the best because they've taken industrial action to maintain their pay at all times. All workers not very far below that. Nurses dropping down, and medical practitioners the worst group. Just in case, I think because lots of us know other doctors and nurses, when we look at our pay, those are most of the people we know. It's easy to think that everyone's been in the same boat. Here's the thing that I know it's chalk and cheese, and half of you will be hating me comparing us to plumbers. But what's quite good about it is that obviously it's not 18 years of training to be a plumber. It is definitely a year of training. They've got to keep up to date, etc. They have got costs, but this is about an employed plumber working for Pimlico Plumbers in an industry where there are some professional standards, and also they are in great demand. And you can see this chap was earning £210,000 a year, age 34, and he doesn't work weekends. And just in case you think that's a super one-off, and indeed this person is probably great, Pimlico Plumbers last year were recruiting, offering between 100 and 150,000 for plumbers who were signing up as employees. So it just gives you a bit of a feel for what's going on out there. Now, what's really important, I think, and hopefully you'll all agree, is that all of us have a responsibility to leave the profession and the NHS better than we found it. It really is behoving on us not to kick the ladder away. So if we want to keep the profession well staffed and we want to recruit the best people, we need to maintain paying conditions. There's no way around that. What's really gone wrong is that the DDRB, that's the Doctors and Dentists Review Body, over the years has been corrupted in its purpose by government interference, no doubt about that. And I'm not going to go through every item of this, but basically what needs to happen is traditionally the DDRB compared doctors' pay to cost of living changes, recruitment and retention, and comparative professions. But what happens now is government's got control over every element of it. They single-handedly choose all of the people on the review body. They set with a letter what the remit will be, the criteria, the indices that must be kept within. On the front page of the DDRD report, there are more of these requirements for the DDRB. When the report is announced, it's up to government as to whether they implement it or not. So I have so many bites at the cherry, it's ridiculous. All of these things need to go back to the way they were, and these were the principles which were set up when the DDRB was founded. From the point of view of pensions, as you know, lifetime allowance was recently scrapped. That isn't something we called for. We did ask for annual allowance for defined benefit pensions such as ours to be removed. Treasury felt that was impossible. We wanted annual allowance to be higher. Initially, government offered a lower amount than they ended up with. 60,000 is definitely an improvement, and that is down to long-term lobbying of government and the pressure from our recent indicative ballot. There's no doubt that if we bring pressure to bear, we can make a difference. Clearly not everything is fixed, and the biggest part of that lack of things being fixed is, as I said, pension value erosion, because actuarial figures show that if we retire at 60 now, we'll probably live to 30. Any loss in pension is hugely magnified across those 30 years. So if you should be being paid an extra £40,000 a year at retirement, if you've got a value of about 50% final salary, you are losing £20,000 a year for those 30 years of retirement quite easily. So you can see it massively racks up rapidly. And this is why, although pension taxation is much better than it was, pension value is not fixed yet. So, in summary on all of that, we have fought hard on pension taxation, and we've got some of the way there, but we must continue the fight to fix pay now and for the future. What's happened so far in terms of what we've done? Well, you will have seen the consultative ballot, and it only lasted for 2 weeks. It was over a half-term holiday, and we had a really reassuring turnout ballot of 61%. And 86% voting in favour of industrial action. We are in talks at the moment with government. We haven't got as far as we need to get, so we think it's right and proper that we continue preparation for balloting, and we prepare you as members for that to happen. The industrial action type which we would be using is a Christmas Day service. We're not doing a full walkout like juniors. We don't think that would be a sensible thing to do. And that might be all consultants at once, or it might be as part of it by a specialty at some point. But the principle is Christmas Day service. We often worry about the level of support that we would get from the public, and this is a year old, but if anything, support has increased for many of the groups on here. Nurses, you can see, are the most supported, 60% support by the general public, 71% sympathise with the strike. Doctors in hospitals, 54%, 65%. So a really good level of support. And whilst I am the first to admit that a lot of that will have been about junior doctors rather than consultants, there will be quite a great deal of crossover. The other thing that I would point out to you is right at the bottom of this is barristers at 19% support and sympathy with strike action. They did take strike action for their 15% pay increase, and they did get it. I'm going to now go through a few slides of the sorts of things that we say to ourselves as to why we shouldn't be protecting our pay, and I think they're really important to look at. So patients in need of urgent care have waited too long already, therefore we shouldn't take strike action. What we'll try and do as best we can is give hospitals plenty of time and colleagues plenty of time so that we can move really critical patients around and they're not going to be cancelled at the last minute. But if you think about the impact of being short-staffed, then that has a much greater impact at the moment on the care that we can deliver and we know that we want to deliver. Consultants shouldn't take strike action. It's unsafe for patients. We already take 104 days of withdrawing our labour per year, which is obviously weekends. We've also got the bank holidays and, excuse me, coughing, and it's only an extra day of those. We'll still be providing emergency cover. Funding should be focused on patients and improving the health service. The amount of money that goes into the health service is absolutely down to government. It's not a matter of consultants. It's not up to staff, nurses, doctors, to, as they currently are, subsidise the health service so hugely by allowing their pay to be eroded. It's got to be fixed. Consultants don't need a pay increase compared to other NHS groups. This is not a zero-sum game. Consultant pay is not taken from nursing pay unless the government tries to make that happen. It's got to be supported properly. It's got to be funded properly. I'm planning to retire soon. This isn't my fight. Well, as I've explained above several times, it very, very, very much is your fight. You've got a lot to gain by fixing pay and the impact that has on your pension. I don't want a pay rise because it's going to give me a big pension tax bill. A couple of things on that. Firstly, it is our aim to try and organise a compensation scheme similar to the 19/20 one which was used, which compensated us against pension taxation at the time if we get a pay increase. Secondly, any bill we do get is insignificant compared to the increase in pay that you will get during the course of your career from it and then your pension. So I would really write that off as a concern. What do you need to do as a consultant? The most important thing is to update your details. Even if they haven't changed, go and check on the BMA website. Make sure your home address is correct or we can't send you a ballot. Make sure that your work address is correct. Make sure your professional details are correct. Really, really important. This is going to be a postal only ballot. By law, they can only be postal. It's got to come to your home address. Not voting is worse. So what we've got to do is avoid a situation where we don't get the turnout. It will be terrible for the profession if we have 99% of people saying they want to take action and a 49% turnout. Definitely not ideal. Within trusts at the moment, so that we've got really good communication, we're setting up trust-wide WhatsApp groups. Make sure you seek out yours and join it. LNCs will be setting these up over the next week or so. Also, make sure that your specialty has got a key link person who is linked into your LNC. Very, very important. And chat to colleagues. Are you voting? If not, why not? How are we going to address these things if we don't take a stand? So as I said, balloting essentials, we have to have a 50% turnout. It doesn't matter how many people vote for action otherwise. Also, it's worth thinking about the impact for the government if we have a failed ballot. Nothing would cheer them up more. And what happens to our pay and pensions is truly dependent on us as union members, not not at BMA Central, but us as union members, and our strength of feeling and our share of power over this, no doubt about it. The whole demand that I've laid out to you today is based on fairness. It is simply not fair that since 2003, more than a third of your pay has been taken away from you, and more than a third of your pension value, particularly when that hasn't happened across the whole economy. And we've asked really nicely for 10 to 15 years. So you've got to ask yourself, if we don't do this, then what will we do? And if we don't do it now, when would be a better time? So our demands, in summary, a reset of the independent pay review body. We want the new DDRB to look back to the start of austerities when our pay has fallen behind and produce a plan for restoring that. It doesn't need to be in a single year, but we do need a down payment for the lost pay this year. So it needs to be greater than inflation. We totally recognise that industrial action from an ethical standpoint must be a last resort. We have for the last 15 years submitted brilliant economic data to the DDRB, and because of these government controls on the DDRB, they've been basically ignored. And while we're in talks with government to sort this out, they may fail. And if so, we need to be ready to ballot. So remember this, we need your help to fix pay. We're all in this together. You must return your ballot by post. It's got to be done. Make sure you check the last post details. We need 50% of BMA members, consultant BMA members, to send their ballots back, and we need a majority yes. So, in summary, fix pay now and for the future. That will help fix consultant retention issues, and it's going to future-proof the NHS for staff and patients. Thanks very much for listening.